Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Fury. I feel knackered today, and I think I've got a bit of a cold. So I will crack on for as long as my old, weary body lets me, and then I shall pass out. And you could just kind of just watch me like that for a little while. Passed out. But no, I'll do my best. We've only got about three sessions left, I would say. Tea makes you feel better. So if I can kind of get through a good chunk today, I reckon about 3 sessions, 3 hours left, and then we'll have finished this book forever. Sad times. It all got a bit dark in the last session, darker even than usual for me. Brick basically broke Rilke. He crushed her head. He didn't really mean to. Didn't kill her, but she just lost the plot. She didn't know what was going on anymore. She didn't even know who she was. And now she's hatched into an angel, but because she's lost her mind, she's just, all she can think about is hunting Brick and getting revenge. So that's happened. So Brick has run off because he's too scared. Rilke has gone after him, and the Man in the Storm has just reappeared, and there's nobody really left to fight him apart from Daisy and Howie. It's all gone very, very wrong. Cal, San Francisco, 2:34 p.m. Cal stopped walking, aware of a growing darkness in his head. The air was shuddering, gusts of wind snapping between the trees, carrying the stench of smoke and blood. The ground felt like a living thing, shaking so hard it made his teeth chatter. Adam hung on to the pocket of his jeans, staring at him. "Daisy?" Cal said, sensing her terror. What was happening to her? This was all wrong. Oh yeah, and Daisy's just had a big fight, hasn't she, with the Man in the Storm? I think. Yeah, I think so. This was all wrong. He'd never felt so goddamned useless in his life. Things had always been so under control. His life, his friends, everything. It had been perfect. Now, though, he couldn't even look after a little girl. He swore, thumped himself in the chest, hard enough to hurt. "Come on, then," he yelled to the thing inside him, the creature. He knew it was there because it had made his friends try to murder him, his mum too, what felt like 1,000,000 years ago. "Come on, you useless piece of crap. If you're going to do something, then just do it." He hit himself again and again, but the angel didn't respond. Maybe his didn't work. Maybe it had died on the journey over from wherever it had come from. He remembered once at school when they were kids, they'd had a day of show and tell. Megan, where is she now? Did she survive the attack on London? Is she dead? The sudden rush of loss was unbearable. Had brought a chick to school. Her parents kept chickens, and one of the hens had been allowed to breed. There had been dozens of them, and she'd brought one to school in a shoebox. On the way in, though, it had died. It had been scared to death. When she opened the box, all that was left was a tiny bundle of flesh and feather, already cold. Had that happened to his angel? Was it lying inside Cal now, a collection of weightless broken parts rattling around inside his soul? The thought made him want to open himself up and pull everything out just to get rid of it. And what could he do without his angel? Walk up to the Man in the Storm and just ask him nicely to piss off? All the man would have to do is think it, and Cal's body, the body he'd had his whole life, every single cell of it, would simply be erased. 9 pints of blood, a few bones, all wrapped up in the thinnest coat of leather, all those years of training, Choilyfoot, sparring with his Sifu, all that for nothing. As far as weapons went, he was about as dangerous as a wet sock. "Oh, damn it," he said, shaking the darkness away, taking another step. Adam held on, dragged along beside him. He didn't show any sign of changing either. If anything, he looked younger and more feeble than ever. The new kid, Howie, had gone with Daisy, hadn't he? And Brick? Cal couldn't be sure. Rilke, poor lost Rilke, had turned too. Maybe all 4 of them were fighting. Surely that was enough, wasn't it? They'd scared the beast away when it was just the 3 of them back in London. It had to be enough. Only it wasn't. He knew it. Cal thumped himself again, screaming, "What's wrong with you? Are you scared? You're pathetic! Pathetic!" Still no response from his angel, and his helplessness, his exhaustion, his fear was suddenly a fury that boiled up from his belly. He charged through the trees, running now, heading for a band of sunlight that sat ahead. The hell with it. It didn't matter that he was human. It didn't matter that he would die. He'd fight the Man in the Storm anyway. At least he would have tried. Nothing could be worse than hanging back, hiding in this forest. Nothing. He burst from between the last line of trees, sunlight blinding him so much that he almost didn't see it. Then he caught a glimpse of it between his fingers, a trench that ran parallel to the forest, a sheer cliff that dropped off metres from his feet. He skidded to a halt, kicking pebbles into the crack. There were footsteps behind him, and he held out an arm so that Adam wouldn't topple off the edge. "Jesus," he said, leaning over. Below, maybe 30, 40 metres, was the ground that had once been joined to the forest. Between him and it was a ravine that had been opened up in the shaking earth, stretching as far as he could see in both directions. He felt his head spin and took a step away, lifting his head to the horizon. Dominating it was a black hole that stretched north to south, land and ocean boiling into it as it continued to grow. He was on a hill near the top and he could see for miles, but all there was against the sky was the pit, a halo of dark clouds suspended over it. Cal slapped his hands to his head, as if trying to stop his sanity from fleeing on the wind. It was just so vast, so impossible. The man in the storm was eating everything, every rock, every drop of seawater. He was devouring it. If Cal went over there, if he could even make it over the ruptured ground, it would suck him in without even noticing. He'd be just another morsel alongside the million other souls who had once lived here. His death would mean nothing. His life would mean nothing. He'd just be pulled into that hideous gullet, snuffed out of existence. He collapsed to his knees, too numb to speak, too numb to cry, too numb to move. It was over. Daisy would die, the others would follow, and the world would end. He closed his eyes, hearing the relentless grind of the storm, the deafening crack as the bones of the world snapped deep beneath him. Something touched his shoulder, and he flinched. He looked, saw Adam right next to him, the little boy's face as expressionless as always. "Sorry," Cal said. "It's over, I think. There's nothing we can do." Adam took Cal's hand, holding it against his chest. Cal rested there, hearing the beat of the boy's heart as fast as a rabbit's. Adam took Cal's head, holding it near his chest. Did I say that? I can't remember. Cal rested there, hearing the beat of the boy's heart as fast as a rabbit's. It should be the other way round, he thought. He should be comforting the kid. He pulled away, wrapped his hands around Adam's waist, hugging him. "You've been so brave," he said. "I'm sorry this had to happen to you." Adam looked up to the horizon, and Cal followed his gaze, seeing more of the world slip down the throat of the beast. The sea was making a noise, the like of which he'd never heard, a sonic groan that was almost human, as if the ocean couldn't believe what was happening to it. So much of it had been swallowed, billions and billions of gallons, that even if they were to find a way to stop the man in the storm, the world could never be the same. "Don't look," he said, pulling Adam closer. "It's better if you don't see. Just pretend." Pretend what? He'd never been great with kids, never really knew what to say. "Pretend it's a game, like hide and seek. We'll go back into the forest, find a place to hide, just for a while, then..." He swallowed, then tried to cough out the lump in his throat. "You miss your mum? Your dad?" Adam shook his head, his eyes narrowing. "I do," said Cal. I miss my mum so much. I think we'll see them again soon. It won't be long, yeah?" Only you won't, he thought, because there's no afterlife in there, nothing to look forward to, just darkness, nothingness, for eternity. "Think, Cal, there has to be something." He put his hand to his chest. Maybe his angel just needed some encouragement, like a gun to its head. "I need you to wait here," he said. "Promise you won't follow me, yeah?" Cal rested both hands on the boy's face, holding him. "It will be okay. If you don't see me again, go back into the trees. Someone will find you." He let go of the boy and turned back towards the ravine. From up here it looked bottomless, as if it led right to the very centre of the earth. This was so stupid. It was insane, but what choice did he have? He closed his eyes, thought about his mum, his dad, about Megan and Eddie, about Georgia too. If he did this, he'd never know what it was like to kiss her, never know how her body felt in his arms. But that was okay. It was okay. He took a deep breath, leant forward, and let himself go. Cal, no. Brick, Clear Lake, California, 2:42 p.m. Brick's landing was messy, his wings getting in the way as he materialised, tripping him up. The ground rose up too quickly and he covered his head with his hands, crying out, the sound tearing its way through the grass and then rock and then water. He tumbled head over heels, hearing the crack of ice as it formed around him, momentum carrying him across the surface of a lake, then throwing him up the other side where he eventually rolled to a halt. There was no pain. He didn't think he could feel pain in this state. There was relief, though. He'd got away. He didn't have to fight. He sat up, the world a shifting myriad of atoms and molecules that should have been dizzying, but which somehow made sense. Holding up a hand, he could see things that he was made of, the cells of skin and bone and muscle and fat, the shifting current of his blood, and the fire that burned somehow inside him and outside him at the same time, making him look transparent. There was a dark stain against his burning skin, and it took him a moment to understand that he was seeing it through his hand. He dropped it to his side, seeing a cloud of smoke in the sky over the distant hills. He hadn't gone far enough. He got to his feet, lifting himself up by just thinking about it. Now that he was used to the creature inside him, it wasn't too weird. It was good, actually. How many times in his life had he wished for power like this? How many times had he wanted to be able to run away from it all, or to crush the faces of people who pissed him off? And there had been so many of them. God, what he'd have done to have had this when he was at school. Nobody would have taken the mickey out of him then. That made him think of Rilke, and he shuddered. She deserved it, he told himself. She had it coming ever since she killed Lisa. But the words made his gut churn. He tried to forget about it, reaching deep into his head and switching off the angel. That was the best way to think about it, as a machine, a suit, like Iron Man or something. The angel was the powerful one, but it didn't have any control. It could only do what he told it to. He wasn't quite sure why, but it made sense in a way. They couldn't survive here in this reality by themselves. They had to live inside you, like a parasite in a host. And once there, they didn't have any choice but to go along with what you wanted. He was pretty sure his angel was trying to communicate with him, was probably trying to tell him to go back, to fight the beast, but screw it. His body, his rules. If the angel didn't like it, then it could go back to wherever it came from. The flames flickered out, and he felt a moment of discomfort as his wings folded themselves back into his spine. Being human again wasn't pleasant. He felt too real, nothing but meat and gristle. His teeth felt awkward inside his mouth, big and blunt and loose. He was tired too, and when he ran a hand over his hair, he came away with strands of copper between his fingers. He shook them away. Seeing with his old eyes was good, though. He was in a field, no, a valley maybe. There were no crops here, just wildflowers. The lake he'd hit on the way down was huge, stretching all the way to the horizon, the surface still agitated from the impact. Along the closest bank were a few houses. Maybe he'd be able to get some food there. He was starving. He set off, the sun like a second skin making him itch. The heat reminded him of home, of Hemingway, and that in turn made him think of Daisy. You left her, all by herself. You left her to die, his head said. But that was a lie. Howie had been there. She hadn't been alone. He carried on, forcing himself to forget. The first house was close, a big wooden thing that might have been a ranch or something. There were horses in the garden, a few of them looking up at him with big black eyes, their tails swishing. What was he going to do? Knock on the door and ask for a sandwich? Just go in and help himself? It's not like the owners could stop him, not now. He'd taken another few steps when a door opened in the house, an old woman stepping out. She was holding a basket of something, washing maybe, and was so focused on getting down the steps that it took her a while to notice Brick. When she did, she flinched. "Hello?" she said in an American accent. "Can I help you?" I'm hungry," he said, not sure what else to say. "I haven't eaten in a while." "Oh." The woman backed up towards the door as Brick kept on walking. "I'm afraid you'll have to go. We don't feed migrants here. There's a town around the lake where you might be able to find Brick cocked his head, trying to make out what she was saying. Her words were long and wet, shapeless, and on one side of her face had sloped as though she was having a stroke. She made a noise like a vomiting dog, the basket slipping from her fingers, spilling laundry over the ground. Then she was running, coming straight for him, her eyes two blisters of hate almost bursting from her face. Brick swore, retreating. How the hell could he have forgotten about the fury? "Wait!" he said, turning, tripping on his own legs. He fell, landing awkwardly, a bolt of lightning-sharp pain firing up his left wrist. He pushed himself up, but it was too late. The old lady's hands around his neck, her nails digging into the skin of his throat. He gagged at the sudden stench of BO and perfume, crying out as her fingers gouged a path up his cheek. Panic ignited the force inside him, the whoomph of flames filling his ears, followed by the thrum of the angel. He launched himself upwards, turning as he went, seeing the old lady's arms disintegrate into ash. Still, she reached for him, though, choking on the dust of her own body, the nubs of her shoulders swivelling. "Go away," he said, the words causing the old woman to erupt into a red mist, blasting the wooden house into splinters. The force of it knocked him back, and he cried out again, a sound that hit the lake like a rocket, the water erupting. "Calm down," he ordered himself, not daring to move, just hovering there above the frozen grass. There was movement from the other houses now, people brought out by the sound of the explosion. Time to go. He rose up, ready to fire himself away from this place, feeling the air around him twitch and wobble as the angel started to pull reality apart. He was on the verge of transporting, the world beginning to melt away, when he spotted the shape in the sky, another flame just like his. He stopped, peering into the sun as the angel got closer. It would be Daisy, coming to plead with him. It wouldn't work, he'd made up his mind. "Leave me alone," he said, keeping his words inside his head this time where they wouldn't do any harm, knowing she'd hear them anyway. "Just go away, Daisy, I'm tired of all this." She replied, but he couldn't make any sense of it, catching snippets of words. "Tall boy, broken doll." And was that Daisy's voice or Rilke? He realised, and by the time he'd thought her name, she was on him, a scream ripping across the valley hard enough to create a tsunami of dirt. The shockwave punched him backwards through the wreckage of the farmhouse and the one behind it. He curled his wings around himself, the fire protecting him, but there was no time to recover before she attacked again. He felt himself lifted off the ground, and now there was pain, like his spine was being ripped out. Rilke swam up before him, her burning fingers dancing in the air, pulling invisible wires in his skin. "Here he is," she said, her words echoing around the dome of Brick's skull. "Here he is, Schiller, the tall boy. Shall we break him? Shall we pull off his wings like a butterfly? Mother will be so proud." Her face was an angel's, her eyes 2 pockets of rancid sunlight, and yet past the fire, barely visible, he could see the girl's true expression, and it terrified him. It was loose, slack, like a badly painted doll. There was still a hole in her head, the one that he had made. She'd always been mad, but he'd done this to her. Anything good left in her had leaked out of that hole, dribbled away. It had left her a broken, empty thing. "No," he said, struggling against her. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." She wrenched his head up like she was trying to pull the cork from a bottle. He spat out a gargled cry, his arms cartwheeling. Something popped, a vertebrae, and this time he fought back, shouting at Rilke, letting his angel speak. The word fired upwards, rumbling across the valley like thunder. It missed her, and he tried again, screaming this time, his ears ringing with the strength of it. It struck her like a sledgehammer, but he didn't wait to see what would happen. He closed his eyes, burned a hole in the world, and stepped through. Oh dear. Cal, San Francisco, 2:46 p.m. He fell, the rush of wind stealing every breath from his body. He crunched off the side of the ravine, the pain lost in the roar of adrenaline. Then he was spinning, hitting the wall again, everything going black. "Just work, oh God, please work." There was no indication that the angel was waking, but it was so cold down here, freezing. He felt as if he was plummeting into the heart of a glacier, one that had no end, no bottom. Another impact, although there was no pain this time. "Come on, you bastard, it's now or never." If he hit the bottom of the ravine before transforming, then both he and his angel would die. The chill was spreading, seeming to radiate from his chest. He tried to look at his hands, but it was too dark, and he was falling too fast, spinning in wild circles. How much longer did he have? Seconds? "Come on," he said, feeling like a skydiver whose parachute had to be opened by someone else. "Come on, come on!" Something burst from his skin, a flicker of flame that was blown out instantly by the wind. "That's it!" Another trembling flame swept over his body, fading as fast as it appeared. In the flash of light he could see the walls of the ravine narrowing. He was going to hit the bottom. He felt it surge up from inside him, a cold shape that clawed its way free of his soul, screaming like a newborn baby as it erupted into fire. He balked at the horror of it, fighting it, suddenly wanting to die rather than be host to the creature inside him. He thrashed, the movement jerking him sideways through the rock, shattering it into splinters. He opened his mouth and unleashed a howl that cracked open the rock face, splitting it like an axe through wood. He cried out again, feeling two impossible shapes fold themselves out of his spine, sails of pure energy that cleaved through everything around him, carrying him upwards until he burst from the ground. He forced himself to stop, to hang there, 100 metres up, the land laid out below him. His horror was gone, replaced by an excitement that roiled inside his gut. The angel thrummed, its fire in every cell, the sonic pulse of its heartbeat making the air sing. He'd never imagined it would feel like this, as though he could take the whole world in his fist and crush it. He'd never imagined it would feel so good. Every other emotion, the fear, the helplessness he'd felt just minutes before, was gone. "It's about," he said, the word rocketing from his mouth so hard that he did a backflip. He thrust out his wings as though he'd had them all his life, steadying himself. His lips tingled with the force of the word, and he finished inside his head, thinking, "It's about time. I didn't think you were ever going to show up." If the angel understood him, it showed no sign of it. He felt no glimmer of humanity there, nothing familiar at all. He pulled in his wings, starting to dive. The roar of wind in his ears reminded him of playing football, the sheer joy of running as fast as he could. The world rushed up to meet him, a constellation of golden particles, billions upon billions of them, each moving in its own little orbit, every single one connected in some way. He could dive right through them if he wanted, part reality like a swimmer through water. He laughed, the exhilaration bubbling up his throat as he extended his wings again and came to a halt, remembered why the angel was here. Ahead of him, the horizon was broken. It looked different now, through his angel's eyes. It wasn't just that the earth had collapsed there, it had been erased. There were pockets of complete emptiness, none of those subatomic cogs and wheels that he could make out everywhere else. The man in the storm had eaten them. He'd left absolutely nothing. And he was still down there. Daisy, he thought, wondering how he could have forgotten her, even for an instant. He focused, pulling himself free of the world again, tracking her. He materialised instantly, life locking the door behind him with a clang that made his head hurt. When the halo of embers had cleared, he realised he was back in the forest, Daisy a bundle of rags sitting up against a tree. Cal switched off the engine of his angel and dropped down beside her. Couldn't believe how old she looked, bright white streaks in her hair. Her eyes were dark and full of sadness. "Daisy," he said, walking to her. Specks of dust drifted upwards from her body, defying gravity, as if she was disintegrating. He knelt down beside her and put a hand on her face. She was so cold. "Are you okay?" She shook her head, putting her hand on top of his. The whole forest trembled with the rage of the distant storm, even the birds quiet now. "Adam?" she asked. Cal looked over his shoulder, trying to work out where they were, where he'd left the boy. He opened his mouth to tell Daisy what had happened, only to see her vanish in a pillar of flame. The air popped as it filled the space she'd just occupied, barely having time to settle before she reappeared in a storm of glowing ash, Adam clamped to her chest. The boy's eyes bulged and he sprayed milky vomit over her shirt. "Sorry," she said to him, wiping his mouth. Adam was shaking, but Cal wasn't sure if it was because he was scared or if it was just the tremors from the ground. "What happened?" Cal asked. "Did you see him down there? The man in the storm, I mean." Daisy nodded, swallowing noisily. "He's even more powerful than before," she said. "He almost ate me. I think I saw..." She sighed, her whole body juddering. "Saw what?" Cal asked. "Where he comes from," she replied. "What he is." He sat down next to her on the soft, wet ground, put his hand on her shoulder. He didn't push her, he just waited for her to find the words. "Do you know about black holes?" she asked eventually. Cal nodded. "Yeah, of course. Collapsed stars or something." "I don't know," she said. "But they eat stuff, don't they? Like everything. Light. They just eat until there's nothing left." "Daisy," he started, but he had nothing to follow it with. "The man in the storm, he's like a black hole," she said, smudging a tear from her eye, "because he'll never stop. Not until..." She swung her arms up. "Not until everything is gone." "Hey," he said. "Daisy, it's okay. It's not a black hole. It can't be." But maybe something like one, he thought. Something just as powerful. Was she right? Would it keep eating and eating until the whole planet was just dust? Would it stop then, or would it swallow the moon too and the sun, turn this little pocket of the universe inside out? Daisy looked up at him, sniffing. Just that little girl he'd picked up in his car 1,000,000 years ago. It was eating her too, the fear, the doubt. The storm had sucked up everything else. He saw the question in her expression. We can beat it, Daisy. We have to. She nodded, taking a deep breath, seeming to steady herself. We need all of us, she said, her voice little more than a whisper. All of us? You mean Brick? Wasn't he in there with you? He ran away, she said. Cal opened his mouth ready to vent, but she beat him to it. He's just scared, Cal. It's not his fault. He'll come back. I know he will. Don't count on it, he thought. This was Brick, after all. He'd let the whole world burn if it meant saving his own ass. Where's the new guy? Cal asked. Was he with you, or did he run away too? Howie. He was there. I don't know where he went. Do you think he's okay? Cal hadn't felt another death, not like when Chris had been killed back at Fursville. He looked around, wondering where Marcus was. Rilke, too. She's gone after Brick, Daisy said. I tried to talk to her, but she's Rilke, he said. And she's broken, Cal. Brick hurt her too much. I don't think she can be fixed. We need her back, though. We need everyone, or we won't be able to fight him. Schiller was dead. And Jade, snuffed out like a candle flame. How much longer before Rilke's butchered body ground to a halt as well? There were others, too. The man with the gun back in Fursville, the one that Rilke had shot. He'd had an angel inside him. The person in the burning car, the one he'd passed when he was driving out of London. The people that Marcus had travelled with. They'd been killed on the way. How many more? There might have been dozens of us, he thought, hundreds. But they never stood a chance, not with the Fury. Why was it like that? It didn't make any sense. I don't think the angels had a choice, Daisy said, coughing again. When they cross over from their world, they have to get inside the first person they see, or they won't survive. How does she know that? I just think it, that's all, she said. And there aren't hundreds of us. I don't think there is anyone left. Only us. Cal shook his head, staring between the trees. The sky was darker now, over the pit. It was like 1,000,000 machine guns being fired, artillery shells barking deep beneath the ground. It's only us, Daisy said. But it's enough, Cal. We're enough. You're right, we can beat him. She smiled at him, and he caught sight of something, a memory that leaked from inside her head, carried on the wind like a smell. 2 people in a bed, asleep, as still as waxwork dummies. I'm not scared, she said. Daisy held out her hand, and he took it, clasping her bird-bone fingers. So how do we do it? He asked. She didn't have time to reply before there was a clatter of branches. A skinny figure ducked under a tree and skidded to a halt beside them. Marcus grinned, his face crisscrossed with scratches. Thought you could hide from me, eh? He said. Daisy laughed, the sound somehow louder than the thundering earth. You okay, mate? Said Cal. You found a way down? No, you found a way up, he said. So what's the plan? Fly home? Grab a cuppa? Cal smiled, despite himself. How could he be so relaxed? He didn't understand why they weren't all curled up in a corner somewhere, screaming and sobbing and pulling out their hair. Wasn't this enough to drive a person crazy, leave them a gibbering wreck? It could still be the shock of it, he guessed, a delayed reaction. If they got through this, they might all end up in the loony bin. It's the angels, silly, said Daisy, once again plucking the thoughts from his head. They're keeping us safe in more ways than one. You need to stay out of my brain, Daisy, he said. I'm a teenage boy. There are things in there you don't want to see. Like Georgia, she said, giggling again. Shut up, he said, reaching into her head, seeing a boy there on stage, the image so clear it could have been his own memory. Or I'll start going on about Fred. Hey, she said, backhanding him gently. Don't go there, mister. They laughed quietly, then sat in silence, listening to the distant storm. Seriously, said Cal, how do we beat him? First things first, said Daisy. We find Brick and the others. We can't do this without them. Easier said than... Cal stopped, cocking his head. His ears were ringing like the morning after a concert. Hey, you hear that? It stopped, said Daisy. That's what it was. The storm had grown quiet, so suddenly and so completely that the silence in the forest was almost unnerving. He stuck a finger in his ear, flexing his jaw. You think it's gone? Marcus asked. No, said Daisy, sitting forward, her eyes darting back and forth as she listened. I don't think so. It's just moved. Moved where? Cal asked. The ringing in his ears grew louder, and the forest lit up, full of fire. A shape crashed between the trees, thudding into the soil, glowing with such strength that Cal couldn't make out the person inside until the flames guttered out. He blinked the spots of light from his vision, seeing the new kid crouching on the ground. "Howie," said Daisy, "are you okay?" "I'm okay," he said hoarsely, spitting out a gob of black phlegm. "I got lost when I transported, or whatever it is. Somewhere dark, cold. I thought I was never going to get back. What about you? I saw you get sucked in." "I got out," she said. Howie rolled onto his backside, looking exhausted. He looked frightened too. "I think he saw me." "Saw you?" Cal asked. "What do you mean?" "The man in the storm," Howie said. "I think he knows where I went. I think he's coming." Brick. I'll have to go in a minute, but I'll do a couple more. Brick, Rio de Janeiro, 2:52 p.m. They do get around, don't they? An hour ago they were in London. He burst from the sky like lightning, unleashing a peal of thunder as the world reformed around him. Disoriented, he stumbled, crashing into a sheet of corrugated iron. It was a house of some kind, or a shed, his cold fire reflected in the dull metal. He whirled around, his wings slicing through it, blowing it to dust. There were similar buildings everywhere, hundreds of them, stretching down a hillside. In the distance was another city and another ocean. He saw a mountain with a huge statue on top that he half recognised from the telly. Where the hell was he? A noise behind him, somebody shrieking. He turned again, seeing a face appear between two of the buildings. It was a kid, but the expression belonged to an animal, full of feral rage. Others took up the boy's cry until the place sounded like a zoo at feeding time. Footsteps pounded the dirt as they came for him, swarming from all directions, their eyes bulging, their hands twisted into claws. "Go away!" he yelled, trying to hold his words in his throat where they couldn't cause any harm. Even so, the thought seemed to have power of its own, rippling over the buildings and turning the first line of ferals to ash. "No, I'm sorry," he said, flapping his wings, the sheer size of them kicking the cloud of powdered flesh and bone into whirlwinds that darted playfully between the buildings. He soared, seeing the ferals below, hundreds of them now, trampling each other to reach him. Something detonated in the sky, a shockwave blasting over the favela, flattening the tin houses and everything else. Brick held up his hands to shield himself from it, and through his fingers he saw Rilke cannon earthwards. She was on him in a split second, the impact punching him down through metal and soil and rock, as though he was being slammed into his grave by a freight train even. Not a scary train. He felt the fingers of her mind worm into his head, into his heart, trying to undo him, and he swore at her, each word a hammer blow that forced her back. Brick squirmed loose, his angel burning at full strength, its electrical hum the loudest thing in the world. He rocketed up the channel that he'd carved in the rock, escaping into sunlight. Rilke was waiting for him, hovering, so bright it was as if the sun had fallen out of the sky. All around her was a crater of destruction, the buildings flattened. People were still streaming across the wreckage, stumbling over the corpses of their friends and neighbours, blinded by their own instinctive hate. He stretched out his wings, ready to flee again, but Rilke grabbed him with invisible hands, holding him there. She clamped something over his mouth, a fist of air wedged down his throat. How could she be so strong when she was so broken? "I'm sorry, Rilke," he said. "Look at him shill," he heard her say. "Look at him beg like a dog. What shall we do with him? Shall we do to him what he did to you? Shall we pull him apart piece by piece by piece by piece?" Brick struggled, unable to prise himself loose. He couldn't even force a word up his blocked windpipe. "You killed him!" Rilke screeched. "You killed my brother!" "No!" was as far as he got before Rilke opened her mouth and spewed out a sound. It wasn't quite a word, just a wet, gargled noise, but it came from her angel, and when it struck him, he thought the entire universe had been turned upside down. He hit the ground again, rolling through steel and rock. Even through the chill of the fire, he could feel the agony of it. It seemed like forever before he finally stopped moving. He pushed himself up, his angel no longer burning. Liquid dripped from his face, impossibly hot against his skin, and when he put his fingers to it, they came away red. No, he thought, his ears ringing so much that he didn't hear the ferals until the first one had him by the throat. He grunted, trying to prise the fingers loose, only to feel something smash into his cheek, a fist or a boot. Colourless fireworks danced against the sky, gouging holes in his vision. He tried to kickstart his Angel the way he used to kickstart his motorbike, but he didn't know how. A long, dirty nail jabbed into his eye, and he screamed, "Oh, work, damn it, please, please!" More ferals were on him, so many that they blocked out the sun. Not so many that they hid Rilke, though, as she sailed through the air, her wings unfurled. He could hear a noise over the pounding thrum of her Angel, high-pitched and ugly, like a nail against glass. She was laughing. Who the hell did she think she was? She killed Lisa, shot her in the head, and how many others? Thousands! And she had the gall to accuse him of murder. His anger clawed up from his stomach, an inferno erupting from every pore. It incinerated the crowd, shunting Rilke backwards, letting him push himself free from the ground. He didn't give her a chance to recover, throwing everything he had at her. He swung his arms like he was in a bar brawl, each strike lobbing great gobs of energy through the air. Most of them missed her, carving trenches down the hill, through the city, lashing across the distant ocean. He shouted too, not caring what he was saying, letting the angels speak for him. Rilke fought back, bolts of lightning crackling in all directions as the air between them was churned into a fever. One of his assaults must have hit its target, because suddenly Rilke was cartwheeling, burning like a Catherine wheel as she vanished into a sea of debris. Brick swiped his hand through the air, invisible fingers lifting up 1,000 tons of metal and wood and people like a blanket. He clenched his fist and the blanket scrunched into a ball, the whole thing bigger than a football stadium. He flicked it away, seeing it sail through the air as if it had been launched from a catapult, skimming across the surface of the sea. She had to be dead. That had to have killed her. The ocean exploded, Rilke blazing up from it like a missile fired from a submarine. She vanished, reappearing instantly in the sky above him. Her fire flared up and she disappeared again, then again, filling the air with embers. He could hear her voice fading in and out, still laced with insanity. Broke us, I won't tell her, little brother. She doesn't need to know, not if we kill him. Stop it, said Brick, just stop it. She pulled herself out of reality again, and this time when she reformed, she was right behind him, her fire casting his golden shadow out across the land. She wrapped her arms around him, hers and the angel's, locking his own against his side. The sound their angels made together was unbelievable, the thrum so loud that he could see rocks dancing on the ground below. Everything solid turned to liquid. Sparks hissed and cracked around them. "Should have left him alone," she said, her lips against his ear, the words detonating against the armour of fire, ricocheting off in every direction. The air was growing more agitated, groaning against the force of them. In the distance, the city was crumbling, tower blocks blown to dust. The immense statue snapped in two and toppled, half of the hillside collapsing after it. He fought her, trying to prise himself loose, but he just couldn't budge. The earth beneath them was being pushed away like a helicopter hovering over water, forming an immense crater. The sonic pulse of the angels grew louder, rising in pitch. Still those flashes of light, white and gold and blue and orange, snapped out like whips, each one making the sky shake. He could barely hear Rilke past the roar of it. "You shouldn't have broken us!" "I didn't," he yelled at her. "I didn't. It was the man in the storm. He killed your brother." His words must have rung true, because he felt her grip loosen. He took his chance, burrowing out of her arms. The moment he broke contact, something ignited in the space between them. It was like another nuclear explosion, propelling him upwards on a wave of light. It took him a moment to find his wings, stretching them out and bringing himself to a halt, his eyes bulging at the sight of what they'd done. The force of their explosion had left nothing. No buildings, no people, no water, just a desert of sandy-coloured dust from horizon to horizon. The ocean bubbled across the distant land as it tried to level itself, the roar of it audible even from up here. The air rose and fell around him, the planet catching its breath, the odd crackling spark darting up towards the sky. I didn't do that, he told himself, his own heart pounding almost as hard as the angels. It was her. She did it. She killed them, not me. There was no sign of Rilke anywhere. Maybe she'd blown herself up, ripped herself into atoms, scattered them over the boundless grave below. It was just as well, as Brick had never felt so weak, so tired, even with the fire coursing through his veins. Something drew his attention to the sun, and he turned his head up. seeing it split in two. Rilke dropped towards him, her scream kicking up the dust of the dead, churning the ash into dunes. He lifted his arms, ready to defend himself, realising even as he did so that he couldn't beat her, not by himself. He cast his mind out, opening up the fabric of time and space and stepping through. This time, though, he knew exactly where he was going. Oh my goodness. I'm probably going to leave it there because I've got to go and pick the family up. It's a Sunday today, and they're all they're out on a play date, the kids, so I better go and get them. Some alarm going off somewhere. I hope that isn't the Fury. The next chapter we're back with Daisy, and yeah, it's getting crazy out there. And apologies to everyone in Rio de Janeiro for destroying your city, and indeed those of you in San Francisco. I hope you're doing okay. I hope you're having a lovely day. I hope you're having a better day than all of these characters, because none of them are enjoying this. I'll see you very soon. Hopefully I'll be back, maybe not tomorrow, in London tomorrow. Maybe a Tuesday. I'll try and do another one on Tuesday. And yeah, I will see you then. Take care of yourselves and each other. And yeah, I'll see you soon.